Ruby E. Kirk, K-I-R-K,
And the E stands for?
Ellen.
And where and when were you born?
I was born, you aren't going to want to hear this. I was born on Weston Mountain on the way to Tollgate at home.
At home.
Yes.
Well, that's how my dad was born, was at home also. So I assume at Weston Mountain that the doctors weren't nearby.
No, they weren't, no. They were about 10 miles away.
So is Weston Mountain, is that a city or is that just a name?
No, that's just the name of the mountain, uh-huh.
And is there anything famous about Weston Mountain?
It was known for its potatoes in the early day, but that's been taken away too because Hermiston took over the potato bit.
Oh, really? Hermiston, Oregon?
Mm-hmm.
Ah. I only know of Hermiston because I used to have a girlfriend there, so. So you grew up here in Washington then?
No, I grew up in Weston, on that mountain, and then in Weston, uh-huh.
Oregon.
Uh-huh.
So that's where you grew. What did your mom and dad do?
Well, my dad, he just barely got through the 6th grade. He was kind of thrown out back east where he came from, and he just kind of made his own way from the time he was 9 years old.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
There were a lot of people like that. School wasn't, I mean, school's important to a point, but real life experience and surviving is pretty important.
Yeah, and he made a good living for all of us. We only owned about 20 acres, so he worked out. He could do anything. He could build, or he could do anything. Uh-huh.
And what was his name?
Will Hall.
H-A-L-L?
Yes.
So you said he came from the east?
He came from Iowa.
Really?
Uh-huh.
So how did he end up out here?
Well, his mother her family had moved out here. They were in Iowa and they weren't doing any good, so they moved out here. And she married someone, and after she'd been married to him about 6 years, she found out he had another wife, and so she just picked him up and beat it to Oregon, and that's how come he came out here without any family much.
Ah. Do you remember when you were a little girl what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Well, I mainly wanted to grow up, but I guess I wanted to be a nurse, so that's what I started out to be.
How many? Do you have brothers and sisters?
I have 4 brothers and 2 sisters.
So that means, are you right in the middle then, or where do you fit in that?
I'm 3rd from the top.
Aha. So you were one of the responsible kids because you were older and
Yeah, pretty much, uh-huh.
you had.
Oldest daughter.
Yeah.
Oh, you were the oldest girl.
Yes, uh-huh. But I had 2 brothers that were older than me. They were 6 years older and 8 years older.
Wow. So then, how's your youngest sister? How far down the?
She was 15 years younger than me, and then I had a sister just 4 years younger than me.
Boy, that's like my dad's family. There's quite a spread.
Uh-huh.
And how many children did you have?
I had 3 daughters.
All girls.
All girls, uh-huh.
Huh. I can't ask you which is easier, girls or boys, because you don't have anything to compare with.
No, we wanted a boy, but we couldn't just keep on having kids. So we stopped at the 3rd one. And they are super girls.
Yeah, even this one, or are you just saying that because she's here?
No, they all are.
Yeah, my mom was the same way. She had 4 boys and she wanted a girl.
Uh-huh.
And she asked if she could adopt, and I guess I'm the baby. And I don't remember, but everybody said no because they figured she'd either be such a wimp because being the only girl, or she'd be so tough. So the brothers said, no girls, no adoption.
Yeah.
So you started nursing, or what happened with that?
Yes, I did. I started nursing in 1938, the fall of 1938, and I had in 2 years, and I was always known for being a good worker. So my older brothers had a friend, and he came down with pneumonia and had to go to the hospital, so naturally he wanted me to be his caregiver. So that's how come I got him, and I caught this strep throat from him. And I missed nursing I was in the hospital for 2 weeks getting over it, and then I had to take 3 weeks off to recuperate, and then I couldn't go back to nursing for about 3 or 4 months.
So where was the nursing school?
Here in Walla Walla.
Is it a school that still exists? Or?
It's a hospital yet, but no, I was one of the very. It quit about 1943, I guess, or 4.
St. Mary's.
For
St. Mary's?
yeah.
So were you taught by the sisters then? Were there nuns?
Yes, it was taught by the sisters. Then we had teachers besides that too.
So were the nuns pretty strict back then?
Yeah, I guess they were, but I got along real good with them. I loved them.
So you would have kept nursing except you got the
Yes,
stuff.
yes. And it was right in the middle of my school year, and I got depressed over it.
And what year about was that?
That was 1930. It was 1940.
So before the war then?
Yes, yeah.
Ah. So what happened then? Why didn't you go back to nursing? Where did you?
Well, I had missed out about 6 months right in the middle of the school year, and I didn't want to have to go with the kids that were younger than me that were in the nursing school. So, my future husband, he had the war was breathing down his neck, and so I was going to have to live at home, and I didn't have anything to do. And he said, well, why don't you come here to Seattle? He had went to work for Boeing. Why don't you come here to Seattle, and we'll get married, and you could work at Boeing, and then this fall you could go to Harborview and finish your training. So I went and applied it to, put in my application at Harborview to finish, and when I put down there that I was married, they wouldn't take anyone married, you know. And so that fall, after they needed more nurses, you know, war had broke out, and they wanted me to come back in, and I said, nope, I've had a good job at Boeing, and my husband was going to go in the Navy, and we were going to leave, so I didn't finish.
How come you think they didn't want married women to be nurses at
They
that time?
they didn't at that time. They didn't want married teachers either.
Why do you think that was?
I guess well, that's for women come into their rights, you know.
Tell me about the wages, Mom,
Oh, the wages for
for Boeing.
Boeing. Oh, I got my husband got 67.5 cents an hour. He was a riveter, and I was a bucker for the riveting, and I did the same job as he did, and I got 62 cents an hour.
So even way back then, it was
Yes.
unequal.
Yeah.
So did you start? You were a bucker, right?
Yes.
Did you start bucking before the war or after the war started?
Let's see. Was before the war, I
Yeah,
believe.
before the war, Mom.
Yeah, it was before the war a little bit.
So you got married before Pearl Harbor then?
Yes, yeah. I got married in 1941, February 1941, and the war broke out December of 1941.
Tell him the story of where you were on December 7th.
You know what?
Where were you when you heard about Pearl Harbor? Tell me what was going on and what happened.
No, my husband had worked some, and he was a real good worker, and we had a brand new little 1941 Ford Coupe, and we'd picked up, my brother was at Fort Lewis as a soldier, and we picked up there's about 5 of us in this little old car riding up down the road, and we went to Everett, Washington, and we were on our way home to Seattle from Everett, Washington, and it came over the radio when we heard about Pearl Harbor.
And
So we beat it home right quick because my brother had to get back to the Fort Lewis. He was in the National Guards, and they called them all back in right quick.
so what did you think? I mean, I think of today, my closest experience I had was 9/11. What was the feeling? What was the mood at that point with you, your husband, your brother-in-law?
Well, it was bad because we knew it was threatening us, you know, and we knew it was bad, but we really weren't scared because we knew we were in the United States and we were powerful, you know, so we knew the United States would take care of it.
So when you were working at Boeing, you had a pretty good idea that that you weren't just building planes for fun. You had a.
Yeah, we knew the war was coming on,
It's interesting because different people I've talked to, some were really aware of political life and things like that and had a good idea, where other, I talked to some from the Midwest, and even during the war it was kind of so far away for them. But I assume for you, with your brother-in-law being in the service, that war was very real at that time.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So now this time your husband's still working at Boeing, correct?
Yes, he was,
So what did he do?
He was a riveter, and that's where I got to be a bucker. That's the riveting that I did.
And did you continue doing that once the war started, or?
No, he knew he was going to get shipped out, so he was going to get shipped out to California. So I followed him wherever he went, and then when I got to California, he was sent to Treasure Island. Treasure Island was a big Navy base at that time, and so I went out and applied at Pittsburgh Navy Yard as a welder, and I welded.
Really? Mm-hmm. So where did you learn to weld?
They taught me right there.
So I'm gonna, and I'll jump around a little bit here. Your husband, when it came time to join the Navy, did you guys have I mean, here you are, you've only been married, 5-6 months. Did you guys discuss it, or what was it like at that point?
Well, we knew it was coming on, and I was going to follow him wherever he went, as long as they didn't kick me off, So
Mom, you missed the part about when Pearl Harbor happened, then what did Dad do?
and
As soon as you knew about Pearl Harbor, what did Dad do?
he joined the Navy,
And that would be in
1942.
42,
40.
in Pasco, right?
Yes, and they couldn't take him right then because they didn't have the barracks done in Pasco, Washington at that time. So they told him to go find something to do for 3 months, and so he knew the forest ranger. He spent a lot of times in the mountains. He knew the forest ranger real good, so he wanted to get with the Forest Service. So that's what he did, and the ranger hired him. And I said, "This is a package deal. I go too." So I got to go along with him. That was summer of 1942, and that was the best time of my life. The very most interesting, the best time of my life.
So why was that the best time of your life? Now, where were you, and why was it the best time of your life?
Well, we had just been married a short while, and I loved the mountains too. And we could just kind of come and go as we wanted to, in the Forest Service. And we had good duty, and it was just fun. I had a horse, and I rode that horse all the time.
Tell him where you were, Mom.
Where I was, we were in our mountains, you mean?
At a toll gate.
Yeah, out of Tollgate, you know where that is?
No, Where's Tollgate?
Yes, in the Blue Mountains,
So, and you and your husband, did you have like Forest Service quarters you lived in at that time, or were you living tent and horse?
We just lived in tents and wherever there was a little old shelter. We'd had the 3 Cs before, and they built little 3-sided shacks around all over the forest, and we could camp out in those.
It's interesting because you talk about the CCC. Do you remember the Depression?
Oh, yes.
What was it like?
Well, I couldn't see where it was any different. My dad always had plenty of food for us, even though we were a big family. We always had plenty of food to eat.
Did you go without anything, without like clothes? You have to mend clothing or anything like that, or were you?
No, I think I didn't have any good clothing, but I made out with what I had.
It's interesting again, because when you read history books, you hear depression and soup wines and everything like that. But I've talked to a lot of people that have lived on farms or whatever, and they, just like you, they said, we had eggs and,
Yeah.
fresh meat.
Yeah, we had everything we needed, My dad made a good living for us, even though he had to work like a dog to provide for us,
Different time. So when you were working in the woods during that summer with your husband, Was war in your mind, or was it because you were out in the beauty of nature, you kind of could put the war away for a while?
That's it. We put it away for a while. Yeah, we knew it was coming up though, that he would have to get into the conflict.
So when he went and signed up, did he go in at Pasco then, or did he have to go?
Yeah, no, he went in at Pasco, and they couldn't take him right then because they didn't have any place to put him, no barracks or anything, So
So when he came back from the Forest Service, did he come back to Pasco, or where did he?
yeah, he came back to Pasco, and then they shipped him down to the Navy took him over, and they shipped him down to Treasure Island, California.
And you went with him.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So where did he have to live on base and you somewhere else, or could you stay together?
No, he had to live on base, and I had to live someplace else. Uh-huh.
That had to be tough. Because again, you were only at that time married about a year, a little bit.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
So how did you get to see him, or?
Yeah, well, I had this car, when he was out at Treasure Island, he could come home every night, and I'd go and get him. Uh-huh.
So you drove.
Yes.
So now, was that uncommon for a woman to be driving at that time, or was that common?
I mean, it was a little uncommon, but not too bad. Uh-huh. But I had driven everything on the ranch, so.
You were pretty independent, it sounds like.
Yes.
Tell me about, now the name of the shipyard was Pittsburgh, right?
Pittsburgh, yeah. Uh-huh.
What was it like, and what did you do?
It was up at the bay, top of the Bay Area, towards the hills, and I welded, and I had to learn how. So they put me, gave me 3 weeks training, and in double bottoms, and the double bottoms they were about 3 foot deep, and I was down there with a bunch of Negro ladies, and the Negroes at that time, they got out here in the West where the people didn't know how to be mean to them, and so they just kind of took advantage of us, and they would come break time at 15 minutes or so break time, all that smoke in the bottom, why they just thump right over me, just mash me into the bottom and take off.
Had you ever met a Negro person before?
Not very many, no.
Because I imagine at Weston it was pretty vanilla, so to speak,
Yes.
pretty white.
Yes, uh-huh.
So did you make friends, or was there a definite division?
Well, I don't know. No, I made friends with them. In fact, I've got some of them are my friends yet, if they're alive. Yeah.
So where did they come from? Because I assume that they
They
migrated.
came from back east, in the South, in South Carolina, North Carolina, a place like that.
What type of ships were you working on?
Destroyers.
So were there a bunch of them, or what? Kind of paint a picture for me.
We were at the top of this bay area there out of San Francisco and Oakland, California, and there were 7 ways, they called them ways, that they put these ships in. Started just from scratch welding them, and had 7 of them in there at a time in these ways that were just like a stall where they started right out building them,
And did you stay with one ship, or would you?
No, they kicked these, we were just welding like fast as we could go, and we were shipping them overseas. The war was on, and we were shipping them out they were using them.
So, but would you stay on a ship until it was completed, or would you do like phase 1 and then you would move on to the next hull while somebody else was?
And I do on phase work, and go on to another part of it,
So what was your outfit like? What was your work clothing?
Oh, that's something else. I wore just ordinary clothes, and I had to wear leathers. You know what leathers were? Everything was leather because those sparks off the welding would, if they'd hit on your clothes, they'd burn a hole in them and burn you too. But leathers, they didn't. And we had leather pants and leather jackets and big long leather gloves and boots and a helmet.
Did Did you work side by side with men, or were the women kind of all by themselves?
No, we worked side by side with the men.
And how was that?
That was all right. They treated us all right.
They didn't give you a bad time and say, "Oh, women can't do this job," or
No, they left us alone, and we did our thing. They knew how because we were trained, in that double bottom bit.
did the pay get any better as the war went along, or were you still less than the men?
No, we were about the same as the men there after a while. Yeah,
And do you remember what you were making then, about, just to give a perspective?
I think we were making about, golly, I don't know. I think we were making about 57 cents an hour.
And give me an idea, maybe ballpark, what like a loaf of bread or something like that was, so we can look at comparison.
I imagine you get a loaf of bread for 10 cents.
Okay. So in an hour you could make 5 loaves of bread, basically.
Yeah,
Huh. Was it a noisy place? What was it? What did it smell like?
Oh yeah, it was real noisy, and it didn't smell bad because it was so smoky, from all this welding.
Tell him how fast you were welding destroyers, Mom.
How what?
How fast you guys were putting them out.
Well, we're putting one destroyer out about once a week. We started from start to finished. In about a week, we'd finish a destroyer and kick it out of the way, out to sea.
And was this a Kaiser shipyard? Was this one of Kaiser's?
No,
This wasn't.
no, it wasn't. I don't know who owned it.
What when they launched it, was there a big event when they took it out of the way, or what was that?
No. It was just an everyday thing.
You were too busy doing your job, and
Yes, yeah.
wow, that just had to be amazing, because they're so big, and to think that you're putting them out that fast.
Yeah. Oh, we were just walking all over each other. There were so many of us.
Did was it just another job for you, or was there a sense of you were doing your duty for the country?
Well, I kind of thought I was doing my duty, maybe, but I was doing it mostly for the money.
Because it was both, and that's I
Yeah.
talked to a lot of people like that. That again,
Yeah.
you just had come out of the Depression.
Yeah,
Jobs were still tough,
yeah,
and it was good pay.
yeah.
How do you remember about how long you worked down there?
I worked down there until about a month or two before the war was over. 'Cause they could see the war was about to finish, so they started settling down, not doing as much.
I wonder how many ships were built while you were there.
Oh golly, there was hundreds of them.
And did you do a variety of styles of ships, or just, you said you did destroyers?
They were destroyers. No, they were all the same style, the same size and everything.
And once you took them out of the way, were they finished at that point, or you had to put them in the water and then they had to do more work to them?
Well, they had to tow them up the bay a ways and then do the inside work, like finish them up for kitchens and stuff like that,
Did they have a number and name when they left, so you knew what
Yes, they did,
Oh, really?
And they were named for the presidents of the United States, And one of them, I got a cap there for it, one that I welded on.
The USS Perkins.
Perkins, And I don't know where they got that name. And I remember especially welding on that one. I don't know how come, but anyhow, the last husband that I had, when he came up, came to my house. He had been the medic on that ship, and he had this cap, USS Perkins, and I confiscated it from him because I remembered it.
Wow. What a small world, to think that you built part of it and then...
And it got hit while he was on it, and 3 people were killed. Three of the servicemen were killed while he was on that ship. He was a pharmacist, but they made him the doctor on that ship.
World War II promotion.
Yeah,
So where was your husband then? Because he joined the Navy.
yeah. Well,
Your first husband, I'm sorry.
my first, he, well, he got back. Well, you mean when Mike was on there?
No, once, I'm sorry, I jumped around a little bit. When he went in the service and after he went on training, did he go South Pacific or
Yeah,
Europe?
he was in the South Pacific. He had the best duty in the service. He had taken, what was that, Brenda, they took?
Light training?
No, it was how to run the instruments
Navigation.
on the airplanes. Well, he learned that in Boeing, and when he went in the service, he got that job of being a flight engineer, and he had the best duty during the service. He flew on every big ship there was, big plane there was, and he was a good navigator.
Wow. So he was in the Navy, but he ended up in the air.
Yes, yeah,
So while he was overseas, you're home alone working, correct?
yes,
So how was that? Could you stay in contact? And if so, how?
well, through letters mostly, and I don't know that I don't think I ever got to see him anymore. No, for 3 years or so. I don't think I got to see him.
Did you ever get to go to Hawaii when he was at R&R?
No, I didn't. No.
So again, you're only married a little around 2 years.
Yeah.
He ships over to the South Pacific. He's flying in planes, and you're all by yourself.
Yeah, But he flew all over the South Pacific, everywhere. He even got to Australia on those big cargo ships, cargo planes.
And Burma too, you said.
Yeah,
Oh, he was by Burma. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Did he fly the hump, do you know? Did he fly over the...
Oh, yes,
Oh, man.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So how were you during all this time with him being gone? I mean, what was going on in your head? This young woman at home by yourself and...
Well, the first thing I did is I tried to find me a roommate. Well, my sister came down. She had graduated from high school. She came down to live with me. And where I worked, I met several servicemen, and they were officers. And my sister was a swinger. And I introduced her to some of them, and she married one of them. And so they got them an apartment, and her husband was in the service as an officer. And I lived with her. She lived with me for quite a while till she married him. And then I found me some gals who we boarded to live together, you know. I had some real good roommates. Some of them I have to this day, except they're old now and dead too.
Was this in San Francisco area?
This was in the Bay Area, Oakland area.
Oakland?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Yeah, I never did get over San Francisco too much.
So the shipyard was down towards Oakland then?
Yeah, up towards the mountains from Oakland,
Huh.
You said you rode B train
Yeah,
to get to work?
yeah,
Yeah, tell me about that. How did now did you live in a house, an apartment, a flat?
I had an apartment, and it was on San Pablo Avenue. Had a nice little apartment. It wasn't nice. I had to go outdoors to the bathroom, you know, but it was good. I was used to that because I was raised on Western Mountain. And anyhow, I'd ride that B train to the shipyards, and I'd walk across this meadow, and there was a stop there for the train, the B train. It was a big, long train, not a locomotive like we have, but a kind of electric type train or something like that. There'd be about 4 or 5 big cars on it, and they'd take us right to the shipyards.
So more like a subway train then?
Yes,
kind of.
yeah.
Boy, that must have been a different experience for a young woman from Weston that
Yeah,
lived
yeah.
out here in the plains. And
Yeah, But I liked it. I got with it.
What did you do for fun, or were you? Well, let me back up. How many days a week did you work, and how many hours do you think?
I worked 6 days a week and 8 hours a day, I think.
And then how long did it take you to get back and forth on the train?
It took me about a half an hour to get out to the shipyards,
Okay, so a long day then.
Yeah, it was.
So did you have any time to do anything for fun?
Yeah, I bowled a lot during the war, and I got to be a real good bowler. And then a bunch of us girls that worked at the shipyard, we roller skated, and I got to be a good roller skater too. And we'd go roller skating at night after work.
Was there a rink or outside?
Yeah, no, there was a rink, a big inside rink in Berkeley, California.
So a lot of the women that you worked with, were their husbands and boyfriends in the service? Or?
Yeah, some of them were. They had boyfriends too. So some of them, had husbands that was in the service.
Did you go to movies or anything? Or
I don't think we had many movies at that time.
so more activities.
Yeah,
So did you have a bowling league?
No, I never did belong to a league. I just bowled.
Just a group that.
Yeah,
So where you lived, were there a lot of people from the shipyard that lived in that area too?
Yes, yeah.
So give me an idea of perspective. When you went to work in the morning, were there hundreds of people getting off the train and going where you were going to, or?
Oh yes, See, we had 7 ways going, 7 different ships going, so there's a lot of us. We were just walking all over each other.
Boy, I can only imagine. So how'd they keep track of you? I mean, was there a gate you had to enter through? And
Yeah, I think so. And the first thing I had to do is get on that ship, and they had what they called banjos, and I pulled my lines for welding, and that was a job. That'd take me about 15, 20 minutes to pull these electric lines and hook them into this banjo to weld.
now, what was a banjo? What?
Well, it was a big deal. It was a whole lot of where you'd stick your cords in, and you had to plug them in there in order to get the electricity to weld.
So if you're down in the hull of the ship, correct? You're way down there.
No, I'm up on the deck a lot of the time.
Oh, you're up on the deck.
Yeah,
And the welding you were doing, was it a acetylene weld with a torch or electric welding?
It was with a torch and with both electric welder too. Yeah.
So how good were you?
I got to be real good. I got to be a shell welder.
A what welder?
Shell welder.
And what does that mean?
Well, when you're good enough, they'd let you weld on the outside of the ship. And that's the part that if anybody hit you, you'd sink, And I got to be good enough that I was a shell welder.
So that means you probably not only did a good solid weld, but did a weld that looked good since
Yeah.
it was outwards.
Yeah, that wouldn't leak, yeah.
So did you have scaffolding or bosun seats or?
I hung over the edge on the scaffold, hung over the edge to weld, and I could move it along the ship, as I'd get a part welded.
Are you afraid of heights? Or that didn't bother
No,
you?
no, I guess it didn't bother me. If I fell, I'd fall in the water below, No, I didn't think anything about it.
But it was still quite a ways down to the water, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. I don't scare easy yet. Do I, Brenda?
No.
It's fascinating because a lot of people don't realize how much you changed the world for women. Because prior to World War II, although you were a very independent person, I think maybe a lot of that's growing up on a farm where you had to work and but you opened a lot of doors for women that.
Yeah.
Because there were a lot of women that went to work like you as a riveter and decided they really didn't want to go back to the kitchen.
Yeah, yeah. My favorite saying is, what am I doing to justify my existence? Because I don't do anything now, And that's my thing, is what am I doing to justify my existence? And my son-in-law said, I don't want to hear you say that one more time, Ruby, because if it hadn't been for women like you, the West would have never been settled. So I don't say that too much anymore, but that's the way I feel.
Yeah, That's a good saying though, because I mean that is some of that. You know, it's kind of like getting up in the morning and did I do something to make the world better today?
Yeah, you betcha.
Even if it's just smiling at somebody. To,
Hmm.
So, did you write your husband or have?
Oh yeah, we wrote twice a week, both of us. And I was getting my mail okay, and he was getting his okay too. Of course, it all went into a central station, you know, and
So when you got his mail, excuse me, to you, had it been censored?
oh yes,
So what did it look like when you got it?
Well, that was just blacked out with a pen or something, you know, or maybe even cut out. But I never wrote anything that I wanted him them to cut out.
Did you know where he was then, or
No, I could tell where he'd been when he write me a letter. I could tell where he'd been, but I didn't know where he was going or anything.
Tell them about the code you guys had though, man.
Oh, I had all my relatives. I had a name on every one of them. I had a big map, and I had that name by the whatever that was there, you know. And so he could tell me, well, I saw Shirley this week, you know, and I know that's where he had been.
so? Did you work that out before he left then?
Yeah, yes.
Really? Mm-hmm. Man, that's amazing. The forethought you had to to know that you were going to be facing that. That's fascinating. The little secret code.
Yeah,
What type of things did you write about to him? Do you remember?
Just what I'd been doing, I guess, or something. I don't know. I seem to have plenty to write about.
And what did he write to you about?
Not the same thing, Yeah, he could write and tell me what he and his buddies were doing, you know, and
Did he? Did he? Did he tell you about the war, or did he avoid telling you about the
he
war?
avoided all that. I did too, you know.
Because if you didn't hear about it, it didn't exist.
Yeah, that's right,
What about when he got home? Did you talk about the war?
No, he never did talk too much about the war, did he, Brenda?
No, and when he was dying of cancer, then that's what he wanted to talk about was his war years. But
Really?
until then, he really never.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Because when he got home, did you start having a family right away then, or?
No, we were married 11 years before we had a family. Brenda was the first one.
Wow. Because that's, I heard a lot of people, they got done with the war, they came back and they were ready to get on with life and start a family, and so that's why they didn't talk about the war. But you had 11 years to talk about the war.
Yeah,
Huh. What was, for you, what was the worst part of that time?
The worst part. Well, I don't know. Well, I didn't know anything about it, you know, so I guess that's why I didn't. I'm not a worrier, I don't think, am I, Brenda?
No, I don't think so.
So I didn't think too much about it. But when he'd write and tell me he'd been down in Burma or someplace like that, well, I was kind of upset for a while. But I knew he got back. And he went to Australia and all over the South Pacific.
So you were upset a while because you were worried about him, or?
Yeah.
So was it a big cloud over you all the time where you were worried, or was there a lot of the days where you could kind of just?
I just kind of turned it off because nothing I could do about it, so I just turned it off.
And your brothers, were they in the service, or were they?
Yeah, two of them were,
Oh, really? Where were they?
Well, my one brother's just younger than me. He was in Alaska, and then he was in quite a bit of it down south too. He had a real rough duty in the service, and my younger one, I don't know, he had kind of rough duty too, but he didn't have it as bad as my older one did.
So were you aware of them being in the service at the same time too, or?
Oh yes, yeah. And I wrote to both of them pretty good.
Really? Which is amazing to think back then with the way that communication was, that you seem to have kept in better contact than we do today with all the technology that we have.
Yeah. It was the news I got from them, where it was old, you know, because it had already happened. so it was old, but then,
Because it probably took you a week or so, or maybe a little longer to get information back and forth.
yes, it did, all of that,
And you never came back here during that time, during the war. You stayed down in.
Yeah, I stayed there the whole time, yeah.
So
It wasn't,
oh, sorry.
it wasn't easy to travel around at that time either, you know. Like for civilians like me, it wasn't easy to go.
Just because of transportation as a whole, or because
Yeah.
so many military things?
Just because of transportation as a whole,
Because I've heard of some people hitchhiking around. I assume you didn't.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I could hitchhike like you wouldn't believe.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
How far did you hitchhike? Just down the area down there, or?
Yeah, wherever I had to go to a store or something like that, you know.
So was it it's interesting perspective. Was it a safer time than you think, or is ignorance bliss?
Oh, it was a lot safer, yeah. It was just much safer. In fact, I had this nice little car, you know, and my husband said, now you see a sailor hitchhiking, you pick them all up. Yeah, I'd be going out towards his base or something, and there'd be some going there, and you pick them up because that's how they get from here to there. So you picked up hitchhikers, and I never had any trouble with them.
I assume you never would have told Brenda that as a young woman to pick up any sailors she sees
No.
hitchhiking down the road.
No. No.
I wonder why the world changed so much.
I don't know. It was for the better then.
Which it was just good because you give a good perspective. Because one of my questions is was it a more innocent time, or is that something we reminisce about? You know, we get nostalgic about. But it sounds like what you saw and where you lived, it was a much different world than theirs.
Yeah, it was a more interesting time at that time than it is now. Yeah.
Before going to California, had you ever been away from here much?
No, I hadn't. No.
And so your future husband, boyfriend convinced you to leave here and go to Seattle by yourself. Was that tough, or are you just an adventurous person?
I guess I was an adventurous person because I didn't think too much about it.
What did Mom and Dad think?
Well, there were so many of us, I think they were glad to get rid of us. that less mouths to feed,
So now again, he proposed to you after Pearl Harbor happened or before Pearl Harbor happened?
Before, years before. We went together about 4 or 5 years.
And where did you get married, and what was the wedding like?
Well, that's the thing. We got married in Seattle, and we didn't have any wedding. We just got married by justice of the peace. We didn't have a wedding of sorts.
So did you send a telegram home, or did any...
Yeah,
Dear Mom and Dad, I'm married.
yeah.
One less mouth to feed.
Yeah, they didn't think anything about it. It was like that then, you know.
And that was pretty common. A lot of people.
Oh, yes.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, makes it much simpler. Did you go on a honeymoon or anything, or you went back to work?
We were both working, yeah.
Went down to the Justice of Peace, got married, and
Yeah, went to work the next morning. Yeah, that's the way it was.
was it good times? When you look back at that period, was it a life full of life?
Yeah, I think it was, Yeah. We had everything we wanted.
Do you remember, was your husband into the end of the war, or did he get out prior to the end of the war?
No, he got out the end of the war.
So do you remember hearing when the war ended and where you were and what that was like?
Yes, I was in San Francisco at the end of the war, and I think he wrote me, I don't know whether I had a telephone or not, and he was in San Diego, And so I drove down there, and he and his buddy had come in on a ship, and they were in a hotel in San Diego. The both of them were sleeping in the same bed, which they don't do now, you know. And then I stayed there with them about, 2 weeks, I guess, before the Navy decided to ship him to Bremerton, Washington to discharge him. And they wouldn't let me go with him to Bremerton, Washington. I had a car, and I was going that way anyhow, you know. And so I drove up there, and I got there about the same time as he did in Bremerton, Washington.
That's pretty funny. So he took the ship up and you had to...
Yeah, and they wouldn't let me ride with him or him ride with me.
So you went back to the shipyard, quit the shipyard, loaded all your stuff up and...
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Was it hard? Because he's been gone 3 years now. And he's probably seen a lot of different things. You've seen a lot of different things. Was it hard to pick up the marriage again? Or was it just,
I think we just went right on just like we always did. I don't think we had any trouble picking it up again.
Because I hear of some people that the war changed them a lot. But so did your husband come back the same person?
Yes, he did, yeah. And he was a good person always.
Were you both patriotic and proud of what you did?
Yes, we were, yeah.
Sounds like you guys...
He wouldn't had to join the service, but he didn't want to, the war was on, he wanted to do his part in it. So he joined the Navy. The only thing when we came back, why the boys that were his age that was left at home, they stayed on the farm and they didn't join any service. And when we came back, they didn't want anything to hear about the service at all, and we didn't have any friends, period. We had to pick up a whole new bunch of friends.
Because Dad was old enough, he could have stayed out of the service.
Yeah, yes, and then his Granddad Key, Joe Key, could have kept him down because he was a farmer.
So why do you think did the farmer, the ones that stayed back and farmed, didn't want to have association because they felt embarrassed?
I think so. They didn't want to hear anything about the war. Yeah.
Because I know that some which is different, because I would have thought, being that they were helping to sustain the farm, they wouldn't have gotten it. But I know that some that were 4F or whatever got, got called yellow and chicken and things of that sort. But that's interesting. So when you got out of the service, you came back to Weston Mountain then?
Yeah.
Or the West Mountain area?
Yeah, we came back to Weston, And Wendell, my husband's grandfather, was one of the biggest farmers in Umatilla County, and he wanted Wendell to farm with him. And he let him have 90 acres of ground as soon as he got there, and the equipment to farm it with. But he had 2 grown sons living with him at home, and one of them was married, but he had to live at home, and the other one wasn't married yet, and they didn't want nothing to do with Wendell because they didn't want him to get in on the farming. So we had to fight and kick our way through.
And what did you farm?
We farmed, we raised wheat and peas.
And cattle.
And cattle, yeah.
It's a hard life.
You betcha, we worked at it big time.
It sounds like you had a wonderful life.
Yeah.
Do you think we learned anything in World War II? Is there a message from World War II for generations to come that we don't want the history books to forget?
No, I don't know, especially anything.
Did it make the world better or worse or different or?
Well, they saved it anyhow. They saved us. I think we would have been taken over if it hadn't been for the service.
It's interesting with the Japanese internment that they drew a line, and if you lived on one side of the Columbia River, the Japanese Americans got put in a prisoner camp, and if you lived on the other side, So you could have lived in the Tri-Cities, on one side of the Tri-Cities, and be as free could be, and live on the other side of the Tri-Cities and be put in the prison. Did you have any Japanese families that you knew in the area?
Yes, we did, and we had a Japanese family that owned a store up on the river in Seattle. We were living there at that time, and they were just real good friends. They were Japanese, and boy, they just grabbed them up and put them in a camp just within 3 or 4 days. We really regretted that because we really liked that couple.
Do you know whatever happened to them afterwards, or you never ended up?
No, we never got to see them again.
Huh.
Mhm.
Wow.
They were sure nice Japanese. We loved them.
Yeah, it's interesting because they said it could never happen again, but as I said, the closest I get to Pearl Harbor was the 9/11 attacks, and it kind of similar, you know.
Yeah.
Was there anything you can think of?
No, you covered everything I jotted down here. I can remember my dad saying something about the other soldiers called him the old married stiff or something.
Puke. Old married puke.
Old married puke. Because he was, most of them were like 18-year-old kids, and he was 25, 6, 7, something like that.
Yeah, he was an old man at 25, wasn't he?
Yeah,
And married.
Yeah.
So to the other kids, he was the old married puke. Huh?
What, so they called him the old married puke, huh?
Old married puke, yeah.
Affectionately.
Yeah, well, yeah, pretty much. Anyhow, there'd be a job to come up, and they'd say, the rest of them would say, let the married puke do it. And he could kick his way through it, so they better look a little out.
Do you think he enjoyed his time in the service?
Yeah, I think he did. He had awful good duty on that big cargo plane.
The important part, did he look good in a uniform?
Oh, yes, he's handsome. He was handsome from the word go.
So, and you guys dated for 4 years or so before you got married?
Yeah,
Was it love at first sight?
No, I don't guess so. You Brenda, I was just thinking, you didn't know Annetta Marr, did you?
No.
Had you heard of her? She said they lived on the Marr place up there, She was about a year older than me. And Dad made friends with Frenchie DeP, and Frenchie DeP as the father, and Harley, his son, and Wendell we're going on a trip through the mountains, went clear through the mountains from totally clear to Dayton, and let's see, what was I going to tell you about that? Oh, anyhow, Wendell had a book along with him, and I wrote my name in it, and he wrote his name in my book, and we were only 12 years old. And Wynetta said, you better not be writing any of your name in his books. But he was going with Rita Davidson, why, she'll clean your clock when you get to high school. And 5 years later, while I was dating him.
So you were pretty much lifelong friends then?
Yes, No, we weren't very good friends in high school. He was a little fast. And I wasn't fast enough to keep up with him. But I did 5 or 6 of them and kicked them out of there, didn't I?
Well, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
It was a pleasure.